Reggie was 36 years old, made $66,000 a year as a hospital IT technician, and believed, with the quiet certainty of a man who fixed broken things for a living, that most problems could be solved with patience and the right tools. He lived in a modest, two-bedroom bungalow in Richmond's Church Hill neighborhood, a place of historic brick sidewalks and neighbors who waved as he pushed his daughter's stroller. The house, purchased for $180,000 6 years ago, was their biggest asset and his greatest source of pride. Its mortgage payments of $1,120 a month were a constant, manageable weight on his shoulders. He felt the pressure of it, but it was a good pressure, the kind that built muscle. His life was built on these manageable weights: the car payment for their 2014 Honda CR-V, the monthly contribution to their joint savings, the simple act of showing up every day for his family. But for the past year, a new, unmanageable weight had settled in his chest. It was the feeling that no matter how hard he worked, no matter how many extra shifts he picked up troubleshooting server failures at the VCU Medical Center, he was failing. He was failing his wife, Chantel. The evidence was in the small, cutting remarks that landed like stones in a quiet pond. It was in the way her eyes would scan a restaurant menu, linger on the $28 salmon, and then sigh as she ordered the $16 chicken, a silent performance of sacrifice he was meant to witness. It was in the magazines left open on their coffee table, their glossy pages showcasing $60,000 kitchen renovations and families vacationing in homes that cost more than their entire net worth. Chantel never said, "You don't make enough money." She didn't have to. She communicated it in 1,000 other ways, with the precision of a surgeon. She would talk about her friend Alicia, whose husband, a corporate lawyer, had just bought her a white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 machine that purred with status. Chantel would describe the car's leather interior, the smooth ride, the way it made Alicia look so put together. Then she would glance out the window at their reliable, paid-off Honda, with its 112,000 miles and the faint scratch on the bumper from a grocery cart, and she would say nothing at all. The silence was louder than any accusation. Reggie was a man of logic, of systems, and processes. He believed in inputs and outputs. He was putting everything he had into their life, but the output he was receiving was a constant, low-grade hum of disappointment. He had no idea just how deep that disappointment ran, or that it had metastasized into a detailed, meticulously planned betrayal. He believed the problem was his income. He had no idea the problem was his trust. He was a good man, a simple man in the ways that mattered. He believed in the promises he made. He believed in the woman he had married. And that belief was about to cost him everything. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that the thought of them betraying you felt like a violation of the laws of physics? Let us know in the comments below and stick with us to see how one man's quiet world was about to be shattered by a single, accidental click. The facade of their domestic normalcy was built on a foundation of Reggie's quiet acts of service and Chantel's carefully curated dissatisfaction. A typical Saturday morning in their Church Hill bungalow was a tableau of manufactured peace. At 7:15 a.m., Reggie would be in the kitchen, the floorboards of the 80-year-old house creaking under his weight. He'd be making pancakes for their 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine, using the $20 griddle he'd bought at Target. Jasmine would be at the small wooden table, her bright pink pajamas a splash of color in the muted morning light, her hair a beautiful explosion of coily puffs that bounced when she laughed. She'd be coloring, the waxy smell of Crayolas filling the air. Chantel would emerge at 8:30 a.m., dressed not in pajamas, but in a $200 set of athleisure wear from Lululemon, her phone already in her hand. She wouldn't look at the pancakes or at Jasmine's drawing. Her eyes would be fixed on the screen. "Reggie, the Wi-Fi is slow again," she'd say, her voice tight. It was her standard opening line. "I can look at it after breakfast, honey," he'd reply, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of Jasmine. He'd already upgraded their internet package to the fastest one available for their area, costing them $95 a month, but it was never fast enough for Chantel. Alicia's husband had fiber optic installed. They get a gigabit connection. She says it's flawless. The comparison hung in the air, another small weight added to the pile. Reggie knew Alicia's husband's firm paid for his home internet as a business expense. He paid for theirs out of his $66,000 salary. It was a detail he didn't bother to mention anymore. He spent his weekends tending to the house. He'd patched the drywall in the hallway, a $50 DIY project that had taken him 2 full days. He'd recaulked the bathtub, spending $22 at Home Depot to stop a tiny leak. He'd planted a small garden in their tiny backyard, growing tomatoes and basil because Jasmine loved spaghetti. The cost was minimal, $30 for soil and seeds. But the effort was immense. These were his contributions, his love made tangible. Chantel saw them as evidence of their poverty. "Why don't we just hire someone?" she'd ask as he was on his hands and knees pulling weeds from the flower beds. "My dad always had a service for the lawn." Her father, a retired dentist, lived in a sprawling 5,000-square-foot house in Northern Virginia with a manicured lawn that cost $400 a month to maintain. Their own lawn was a small patch of grass he mowed with a second-hand, $75 mower he'd bought on Facebook Marketplace. The dollar amounts were a constant, unspoken language between them. When he bought a new pair of running shoes, a $90 pair of Asics, she would comment, "Did you really need those?" But when a package arrived for her, containing a $450 Tory Burch handbag, she would call it an investment piece. She managed their finances, a task she had insisted on taking over 2 years prior. "You're so busy with work, sweetie," she had said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Let me handle the bills. I'm better with the details." He had agreed, relieved. He trusted her. It was his single greatest mistake. He transferred a set amount, $2,000 from his paycheck to their joint account every 2 weeks, and she handled the rest. He assumed the slow drain on their savings was due to inflation, to the rising cost of groceries, to the simple expenses of raising a child. He had no idea she was meticulously siphoning funds into a private account he didn't know existed. The life she wanted, the life she saw on Instagram and in the glossy pages of magazines, was being funded by the slow, secret erosion of the life they had built together. The West End of Richmond, with its gated communities and pristine townhomes, was a world away from their cozy, slightly worn-down Church Hill existence. For Reggie, it was a different city. For Chantel, it was a different city. For Chantel, it was the destination. And she was paving the road there with his trust, one stolen dollar at a time. The cruelty began to escalate in the 6 months leading up to the discovery. It was no longer just about size and comparisons. It became a campaign of quiet, deliberate humiliation. Each incident was a carefully placed stone, designed to wear down his confidence and reinforce her narrative that he was incompetent, that he was holding her back. The outrage accumulated in Reggie's memory, though he didn't yet understand it was a coordinated strategy. He just thought his wife was becoming meaner, more distant. One evening in March, he came home from a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. A network switch had failed, taking down the charting system for 3 entire floors. He had spent the day crawling under desks, running cables, and fielding panicked calls from nurses. He was exhausted, but he was also proud. He had solved the problem. He walked in the door at 8 p.m. to find Chantel dressed for a night out. She was wearing a sleek, black, $2,400 Burberry dress he'd only seen once before. "Where are you going?" he asked, his tired mind struggling to catch up. She barely looked at him, adjusting an earring in the hall mirror. "Alicia's birthday. I told you about it last week." She hadn't. "I was going to ask you to come, but, well," she gestured vaguely at his work uniform, a simple set of navy blue scrubs that cost $30 a set. The unspoken words were clear. "You wouldn't fit in." "Oh, okay. Have fun," he said, the pride from his day's work deflating like a balloon. "I left some leftover pasta in the fridge for you and Jasmine," she said, grabbing her clutch. "I have to go. The reservation is at a place in Scott's Addition. You wouldn't like it. It's very loud." It was another dismissal, another way of cordoning off her life from his. As she walked out the door, she added over her shoulder, "Don't wait up, and try to get Jasmine to bed at a reasonable hour. She was a nightmare this morning." He stood in the hallway, the smell of her expensive $180 Chanel No. 5 perfume hanging in the air, feeling less like a husband and more like the hired help. A few weeks later, they were at a neighborhood barbecue. It was a casual affair, with folding chairs and paper plates. One of their neighbors, a history professor at VCU, was asking Reggie about his job. Reggie, who was passionate about the complex systems he managed, started explaining the hospital's data redundancy protocols. He saw Chantel approaching, a plastic cup of white wine in her hand. She smiled. A tight, artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. She placed a hand on his arm and laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Oh, don't get him started. He thinks he's saving lives, but he basically just plugs things in and tells doctors to turn their computers off and on again." She said it as if it were a charming, self-deprecating joke they shared. But the look in her eyes was pure contempt. The professor gave a polite, uncomfortable chuckle. Reggie felt the blood rush to his face. The public humiliation was dizzying. He felt small, insignificant. He looked at Chantel, who had already turned away to talk to someone else, leaving him standing there, his half-told story dying on his lips. The financial cruelty was the most insidious. In May, their property tax bill was due, a payment of $2,200. Reggie had given Chantel a check for the full amount from his personal savings account, an account he kept with a few $1,000s for emergencies. "Here," he'd said, "this should cover it." A week later, he got a delinquency notice from the city. The bill was unpaid. He confronted her that evening, the official-looking envelope in his hand. "Chantel, what happened? I gave you the check for the property taxes." She looked up from her iPad, feigning surprise. "Oh my God, I am so sorry, sweetie. I completely lost it. With everything I have to manage." She trailed off, the implication being that her life was so overwhelming, so full of important tasks, that a simple $2,000 check could easily be misplaced. "I feel terrible. We'll have to pay the late fee now." "I'll just write another one," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "You can't," she said, her expression turning to one of grave concern. "We don't have it in the joint account. I had to pay for the new tires for the Honda. They were $800, and Jasmine's preschool tuition was due." He knew for a fact the tires had been replaced 6 months ago, and he knew he had already given her money for the tuition. But in that moment, faced with her calm, concerned face, he doubted himself. He felt a wave of shame. He was failing. The late fee was another $110. It was another piece of evidence for her unstated case against him. He wasn't a capable provider. He was a man who couldn't even ensure his family's most basic bills were paid on time. He didn't know she had deposited his $2,200 check into her secret savings account the day after he gave it to her. He had no idea this was a test run for a much larger, more devastating financial disappearing act. She was testing the limits of his trust, and to her delight, she found that it had no limits at all. The final, most chilling incident happened in early June, just 2 weeks before his world would implode. They were sitting on their small front porch one evening. Jasmine was asleep inside. The air was warm and thick with the scent of honeysuckle from the neighbor's fence. It was a peaceful scene, but the tension between them was a palpable thing. "I was thinking," Reggie said, trying to bridge the ever-widening gap between them, "maybe we could take a family vacation this summer. Just something simple. We could drive down to Virginia Beach for a few days, rent a little cottage." Chantel didn't answer for a long moment. She stared out at the street, at the cars passing by. Then she turned to him, and her face was cold, devoid of any warmth. "Virginia Beach?" she said, her voice flat. "Reggie, my friends take their kids to Turks and Caicos. They stay at resorts that cost $2,000 a night." "And you're talking about a cottage in Virginia Beach?" She shook her head, a small, pitying motion. "You just don't get it, do you? You have no ambition. You're happy in this little house, in this little life." "I'm happy with you and Jasmine," he said, his voice quiet. "I thought that was the point." She stood up, brushing off her pants, as if his words had left a residue. "The point," she said, her voice laced with a cruelty that stole his breath, "is to build something, to move up, not to stay stuck." She went inside, leaving him alone on the porch in the gathering twilight. The stars were beginning to appear, distant and cold. He sat there for a long time, the weight in his chest so heavy he could barely breathe. He knew something was deeply wrong. What he didn't know was that Chantel wasn't just dreaming of moving up. She was actively plotting to move on, and to do so, she had to make sure he was left with absolutely nothing. He was not a partner in her eyes. He was an obstacle to be removed. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. It was June 18th, a day that began with the suffocating humidity of a Richmond summer. Reggie had taken the day off work. Jasmine had woken up with a low-grade fever, and since Chantel had an important lunch meeting, he was the one who stayed home. He didn't mind. He loved these quiet days with his daughter. They spent the morning building a pillow fort in the living room and watching cartoons. By noon, Jasmine's fever had broken, and she was energetically racing her toy cars across the floor. Reggie's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter at exactly 12:33 p.m. He glanced at the screen. It was a notification for a voice memo from Chantel. He smiled, assuming it was a reminder to pick up milk or a sweet message about her day. He tapped the play button, holding the phone to his ear. The background noise was faint, the clinking of silverware, the low murmur of a restaurant. Then he heard Chantel's voice. It was not the warm, slightly strained voice he was used to. This voice was cold, sharp, and clinical. It was a voice he had never heard before. "Okay, listen carefully, Mark. I want this airtight," she began. Reggie's blood went cold. Mark? Who was Mark? The name was unfamiliar. He felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. Her voice continued, clipped and precise. "We need to move on the house first. The deed is in both our names, but I've been making the case for months that he can't afford it. I want to file a motion that forces a sale, but I want the proceeds directed to an account solely in my name, arguing that I've been the one managing the asset." A wave of nausea rolled over Reggie. The house, his house, the one he'd painted and repaired and poured his soul into. Next, the car, the 2014 CRV. The title is also in both names. He made every single payment on that car for 5 years, but the payment came from the joint account, which I can frame as marital funds that I managed. I need you to draft a document, some kind of transfer of ownership form. I'll tell him it's for a new insurance policy to get a better rate. He'll sign it. He trusts me. Reggie's hand began to tremble. He sank into a kitchen chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. He could hear his own heartbeat, a frantic, panicked drumming in his ears. "Most importantly," Chantel's voice went on, lower now, more conspiratorial, The school and medical records for Jasmine? I've already spoken to the preschool director. I told her we were separating and that I would be the primary residential parent. I need you to send them a letter from your office, making it official. I want his name removed as an emergency contact. I need to establish a clear pattern of me being the sole caregiver. It has to be clean, Mark. Make sure his name stays off everything. He trusts me. That line, "He trusts me," echoed in the sudden silence of the recording. It was delivered with such chilling, transactional confidence. It wasn't an observation, it was a weapon. His trust was the tool she was using to dismantle his life. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The bright, cheerful kitchen, the sound of Jasmine laughing in the other room, it all seemed to recede, becoming distant and unreal. He felt a small tug on his pant leg. He looked down. Jasmine was standing there, her big brown eyes full of concern. She held up her half-empty juice box, a 25-cent-a-piece item from a bulk pack he'd bought at Costco for $10. "Is it a song, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and innocent. She thought the tinny sound from his phone was music. Reggie couldn't speak. He stared at his daughter, at her beautiful, trusting face, and a single tear escaped his eye, tracing a hot path down his cheek. He was being erased. Chantel wasn't just leaving him. She was trying to delete him from his own life and from his daughter's. He looked back at his phone. The file was a standard M4A audio file, 1 minute and 47 seconds long. His mind, trained in data recovery and system integrity, kicked into a different gear. The shock receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He was an IT technician at a major hospital. His life was built on backups, on redundancy, on ensuring that critical data could never be permanently lost. 3 years ago, he had built a home server using retired hospital-grade equipment. It ran a sophisticated software suite that, among other things, performed an automatic rolling backup of all data on their home network, including their mobile devices. The system was designed for disaster recovery. Any new file that appeared on his phone was automatically synced and archived to his encrypted server within 90 seconds. He glanced at the clock on his phone. It was 12:35 p.m. The voice memo had arrived at 12:33 p.m. The file was already safe. It was copied, archived, and time-stamped on a secure server in his basement. Deleting it from his phone would do nothing. The evidence was permanent. The betrayal was absolute. And in that moment, the man who believed in fixing things knew that some things weren't meant to be fixed. They were meant to be dismantled, piece by piece, with cold, clinical precision. The hours after the discovery were a masterclass in self-control. Reggie's grief and rage were a roaring furnace inside him. But on the outside, he became a man of ice. The instinct to scream, to confront, to smash his phone against the wall was immense. But his training, his entire professional life, was about responding to a crisis not with panic, but with a calm, methodical protocol. He was no longer a husband. He was a system administrator facing a catastrophic failure. His first step was to secure the data. His second was to contain the threat. He went into the living room and scooped Jasmine into his arms, burying his face in her hair, which smelled of baby shampoo and sunlight. Her small arms wrapped around his neck. "I love you, Daddy," she mumbled into his shoulder. "I love you more than anything, sweet pea," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion he could not show. He held her for a full minute, anchoring himself to the one pure, true thing in his life. This was not about a house or a car. This was about her. When Chantel came home at 5:45 p.m., he was in the kitchen, washing the dishes from their lunch. He had scrubbed the counters until they gleamed. He had taken out the trash. He was creating an illusion of perfect normalcy. She swept in, dropping a $30 shopping bag from a boutique in Carytown onto the counter. "What a day," she sighed. kicking off her $300 heels. My meeting ran forever. Oh yeah? How did it go? Reggie asked, his back to her. He kept his voice even, casual. Every nerve in his body screamed, liar. It was fine. Just boring business stuff, she said, waving a dismissive hand. She opened the refrigerator. Is there any of that white wine left? The $15 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc he'd bought was her designated cheap wine. I think so, he said, turning to face her. He forced a small, tired smile. Rough day? You have no idea, she said, pouring a large glass. Dealing with lawyers and contracts? It's a whole other world. She was testing him, dropping a breadcrumb of the truth to see if he would pick it up. He ignored it. What she didn't know was that he already had the entire loaf. The next day, she presented him with the first piece of her plan. She approached him while he was on his laptop, paying bills, or pretending to. He was actually creating a password-protected, encrypted folder containing a copy of the voice memo, a transcript he had painstakingly typed out, and a timeline of her recent cruelties. Hey, sweetie, she said, leaning over his shoulder. She placed a single sheet of paper on the desk in front of him. I need you to sign this. He looked at the document. It was titled Vehicle Title Transfer Application. His eyes scanned the text. It was exactly what she had described in the voice memo. It was a form to remove his name from the title of their Honda CR-V. What's this for? He asked, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He looked up at her, his expression a carefully constructed mask of mild confusion. Oh, it's for the insurance, she said smoothly, her lies flowing like water. My financial advisor, the guy I've been talking to about investments, he said that if the car is solely in my name, we can get a much better rate on our policy. Something about me being the primary driver. It could save us like $40 a month. The lie was specific, plausible. A year ago, he would have signed it without a second thought. He picked up the paper, pretending to read it closely. Huh, I've never heard of that, he said. He tapped the paper on the desk. Let me look into it. I don't want to sign anything without understanding it. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, so fast he would have missed it if he hadn't been looking for it. Reggie, don't be difficult. It's a simple form. It's to save us money. I know, he said, holding up a hand. I just want to do my own research. I'll look at it tonight. He folded the paper and put it next to his laptop, a crucial piece of evidence, freely given. She huffed, a sound of pure frustration. Fine, whatever. Just don't forget. She walked away, her irritation palpable. She had made a critical mistake. She had expected compliance from the man she viewed as a simple-minded subordinate. She had underestimated him. It was the foundational error upon which her entire plan, and its subsequent collapse, would be built. He sat there, his face a blank mask, while inside, the cold, methodical part of his brain logged the interaction, time-stamped it, and added it to the growing file labeled Betrayal. The act of playing dumb was the hardest thing he had ever done, a constant, grinding effort of will. But he knew, with the certainty of a man watching a system error cascade, that his silence was his most powerful weapon. The following 72 hours were a blur of clandestine activity. Reggie operated with the quiet efficiency of a ghost. During the day, he was a father and a husband, performing his domestic duties with a chillingly convincing normalcy. He made Jasmine's lunches, he took her to the park, he endured Chantel's passive-aggressive comments with a placid smile. But at night, after Chantel and Jasmine were asleep, his basement office became a war room. The space, usually cluttered with old computer parts and networking cables, became the headquarters for the meticulous deconstruction of his wife's plot. His first call was at 10:15 p.m. on Wednesday night. He had spent hours researching family law attorneys in Richmond, specifically looking for someone with a reputation for being tough, strategic, and technologically savvy. He found Brenda Daniels, a black woman in her late 40s. Her website described her as a specialist in high-conflict divorce and asset protection. Her photo projected an aura of no-nonsense intelligence. He paid the $250 consultation fee online and scheduled an emergency virtual meeting for the next day, using a prepaid burner phone he'd bought for $60 at a 7-Eleven. The meeting took place at 1 p.m. on Thursday. Reggie took his lunch break in his car, parked in the furthest corner of the hospital parking garage. He connected to the video call from his laptop, using the hospital's guest Wi-Fi. Brenda Daniels appeared on his screen, her office behind her neat and organized. She wore a sharp dark blue blazer and had her hair in elegant shoulder-length locks. "Mr. Williams," she began, her voice calm and professional. "Your email was brief. It said you have irrefutable evidence of spousal fraud. That's a strong claim." "I do," Reggie said. "I have an audio recording." He explained the circumstances of the misdirected voice memo, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He didn't speak of his pain or his shock. He presented the facts as if he were detailing a server outage. Brenda listened intently, her expression unreadable. "Can you play it for me?" Reggie clicked a file on his desktop. He had triple-checked that the audio was being routed through the call. He played the 1-minute and 47-second recording. He watched Brenda's face as Chantel's cold, clinical voice filled the silence of his car. He saw her eyes narrow slightly at the mention of the house. He saw her jaw tighten when Chantel talked about the car title. And when Chantel uttered the final damning line, "Make sure his name stays off everything. He trusts me." He saw a flash of cold fury in Brenda's eyes. When the recording ended, there was a moment of silence. Brenda took a slow breath. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice now carrying a new steely edge. "This is not just irrefutable. This is a 5-alarm fire. The attorney she's speaking with, Mark, has not only engaged in conspiracy to commit fraud, but he has violated multiple rules of professional conduct. Her actions are grounds for an immediate emergency filing to freeze all marital assets and a strong petition for primary custody on the basis of malicious intent." "That's what I want," Reggie said. "I want to protect my daughter. I want to protect my home." "Good," Brenda said. "My retainer is $5,000. My hourly rate is $450. I will need the retainer by the end of the day. We will file tomorrow." Reggie didn't hesitate. "I have it. I have a personal savings account she doesn't know about. How do I pay?" While she gave him the details for the wire transfer, he was already logging into his bank account on his phone. The $5,000 was almost everything he had, but it felt like the best investment he had ever made. "Now, evidence," Brenda continued, "all business. I need everything. The audio file, of course. Your transcript is excellent. I also need the vehicle title transfer application she gave you. Any other documents you can find? Bank statements, credit card bills. Look for anything unusual. Large withdrawals, new accounts." That night, Reggie became a digital forensic investigator in his own home. While Chantel slept oblivious, he sat in the glow of his monitor. He accessed their joint account records. He saw the $2,000 bi-weekly deposits from his paycheck. He also saw a pattern of large, weekly cash withdrawals, always just under the amount that would trigger a bank notification. $800 here, $1,000 there. Over the past 6 months, it totaled over $20,000. Then he remembered something Chantel had said a month ago, a complaint about too much mail. She had signed them up for paperless statements for everything to reduce clutter. It wasn't about clutter. It was about hiding a paper trail. But Chantel had made another mistake. She had used a shared email address for the paperless notifications, an address Reggie also had access to. He logged into the email account. He searched for terms like statement ready and new account. And there it was, an email from Capital One 360, dated 5 months prior, confirming the opening of a new high-yield savings account, in Chantel's name only. He used the forgot password feature, directing the reset link to their shared email. Within minutes, he was in. His breath caught in his throat. The balance was $48,312.72. It was a combination of the siphoned cash from their joint account and, he suspected, money she had hidden from other sources. He took screenshots of everything: the account balance, the transaction history showing the deposit of his $2,200 property tax check. He found digital brochures for West End townhomes bookmarked on her tablet, with prices starting at $650,000. He found emails between her and a mortgage broker. By 4 a.m., he had a comprehensive time-stamped dossier of her betrayal, all neatly organized in the encrypted folder. He uploaded it to the secure client portal Brenda had provided. He felt no triumph, only a grim, chilling sense of purpose. He was not a man seeking revenge. He was a man executing a protocol. The system had been compromised. The threat had been identified. The countermeasure was now ready to be deployed. The strike was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. sharp. The timing was Brenda's idea. Most law offices are winding down for the weekend, she had explained over a secure call that morning. A major filing and a bar association complaint landing at 2 p.m. on a Friday afternoon will cause maximum chaos and prevent them from mounting a coordinated response until Monday. By then, our emergency orders will be in place. It was a cold, strategic calculation, and Reggie appreciated the brutal efficiency of it. Reggie was at his desk in the hospital's IT department, a small cubicle in a windowless basement office. The air hummed with the sound of servers. He was supposed to be running diagnostics on the radiology department's image archiving system, but his screen was split. On one side was the diagnostic software, a meaningless cascade of green OK statuses. On the other was a simple digital clock, 1:58 p.m. He felt strangely calm. The rage and grief had been burned away, leaving behind a core of cold, hard resolve. He thought of Jasmine, who was at her preschool, happily playing with her friends, blissfully unaware of the war being waged over her future. This was for her. This was to ensure that her life remained stable, that her father was not erased. 1:59 p.m. He pictured Chantel. According to her shared calendar, she had a 1:30 p.m. appointment for a manicure/pedicure at a salon in Carytown. A $120 indulgence. He imagined her sitting in a plush chair, scrolling through her phone, perhaps texting her lawyer, Mark, to confirm that he had received the signed paper she'd forged Reggie's name on that morning. She had left the signed vehicle transfer form on the kitchen counter for him to find, a piece of theater for an audience of one. She had no idea that the real show was about to begin. At exactly 2 p.m., two things happened hundreds of miles apart, triggered by digital precision. In her downtown Richmond office, Brenda Daniels clicked Submit. An emergency petition for divorce, a motion for an ex parte order to freeze all marital assets, and a request for temporary primary custody of Jasmine were electronically filed with the Henrico County Circuit Court. Attached as Exhibit A was the M4A audio file of Chantel's voice memo. Attached as Exhibit B was the transcript. Exhibit C was the screenshot of the $48,000 secret bank account. Exhibit D was the vehicle transfer form. The entire package was a digital bomb, delivered directly to the court server and flagged for immediate judicial review. Simultaneously, on a server in a data center in Northern Virginia, a time-delayed email that Reggie had configured the night before was sent. The recipient was the intake office of the Virginia State Bar's Disciplinary Board. The subject line read, Formal complaint regarding attorney Mark Renshaw. Evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud attached. The body of the email was a concise, factual summary of the events. It included Mark Renshaw's full name and his firm. It detailed his role in the plot to fraudulently divest a spouse of marital assets and interfere with custodial rights. The audio file and transcript were attached, 2:01 p.m. Reggie stared at the clock. Nothing happened. The world didn't stop. The servers in his office continued to hum their monotonous tune. He felt a moment of doubt. Was it enough? 2:03 p.m. His burner phone, sitting silently on his desk, buzzed. It was a text from Brenda. Filed. Judge Henderson has it. He's known for his low tolerance for parental misconduct. Stand by. Reggie took a deep breath. He minimized the clock and looked at the server diagnostics. Everything was normal. He was just a man at work. A hospital IT technician doing his job on a Friday afternoon. He had done everything he could to protect himself and his daughter. He had used the tools he had, his knowledge of systems, his methodical nature, his ability to remain calm in a crisis. He had trusted his lawyer. Now it was out of his hands. The protocol had been executed. The system was now responding. He had no idea how swift and how devastating that response would be. He just sat there, in the quiet hum of the server room, and waited for the consequences to cascade. The man who had been underestimated, the man whose trust had been used as a weapon against him, had just launched a counterstrike of such cold, clinical precision that it would not just dismantle his wife's plans, it would shatter her entire world. The strike was silent, digital, and utterly devastating, and the fallout was just beginning. The consequences began to cascade with the speed of a network failure. The first alert of the system-wide crash landed in Chantel's world at 2:08 p.m. She was, as Reggie had predicted, sitting in a plush pedicure chair at Serenity Nails in Carytown, her feet soaking in a basin of warm, scented water. Her iPhone 14 Pro Max, a $1,100 device paid for with funds from their joint account, chimed with an email notification. It was from the Henrico County Circuit Court. The subject line was stark. Notice of electronic filing in case CL 24-1887, Williams versus Williams. She frowned, annoyed at the interruption. Williams versus Williams? It must be a mistake. She tapped open the email. Her eyes scanned the attached PDF. Emergency petition for divorce. Her heart skipped a beat. She scrolled down. Motion for ex parte order to freeze all marital assets. Her breath caught in her throat. This was impossible. How? She was the one in control. She was the one with the lawyer, the plan. Then she saw the list of exhibits. Exhibit A, audio recording dated June 18th, 2024. The color drained from her face. Her perfectly manicured hand, the one holding her phone, began to shake. The voice memo. The one she had sent by mistake. The one she had immediately deleted. She had assumed, in her arrogance, that when she deleted it, it was gone forever. She didn't understand the man she was married to. She didn't understand that he lived in a world of backups and redundancy. The nail technician looked up. Is everything okay, ma'am? Chantel couldn't answer. Her world, so carefully constructed, was vaporizing in real time on a glowing screen. At 2:15 p.m., the second wave of the strike hit its target. In a glass tower office building 20 stories above downtown, Mark Renshaw, a partner at a prestigious law firm billing at $1,200 per hour, was clearing his desk for the weekend. His secretary buzzed him. Mr. Renshaw, there's a call for you from the Virginia State Bar. They say it's urgent. Mark felt a prickle of cold sweat on his neck. The bar never called on a Friday afternoon unless it was a catastrophe. He took the call. He listened for 90 seconds, his face turning from confident to ashen. He didn't say a word. He just listened as the investigator on the other end calmly informed him that they had received a formal complaint, along with a recording of him conspiring with a client to commit fraud against her spouse. They were opening an immediate investigation. His license was in jeopardy. His 40-year career was about to go up in smoke. He hung up the phone. His first thought was self-preservation. He buzzed his secretary again. "Janet, cancel the rest of my day and get me the file for the client, Chantel Williams. Shred it." His second act was to call Chantel. She didn't answer. He left a frantic, panicked voicemail. "Chantel, it's Mark. We have a serious problem. A very, very serious problem. The recording, they have the recording. The bar just called me. You're on your own. Do not contact me again. I can't be involved." He had officially dropped her, leaving her completely exposed. At 2:45 p.m., Judge Henderson, a stern, 60-year-old jurist with 3 decades on the bench, signed the emergency order. In his chambers, he had listened to the 1-minute and 47-second audio file twice. His face had grown darker with every word. He was a father and a grandfather. The clinical way Chantel had discussed stripping a parent from his child's life had sickened him. Without hesitation, he granted every single one of Brenda Daniels' requests. The effect was instantaneous. A digital signal flashed from the court to every major financial institution. The joint checking account with its remaining balance of $1,200 was frozen. The secret Capital 1360 account with its $48,312 was frozen. Chantel's personal credit cards, which she had planned to use to furnish her new life, were suddenly and inexplicably declined when she tried to pay for her $120 pedicure. The public humiliation was acute. She had to leave the salon, her half-finished pedicure a garish symbol of her interrupted escape, promising to come back with cash she could not access. At 3:30 p.m., the director of Jasmine's preschool, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable, received a fax. It was a court order. It mandated that Reginald Williams be listed as the primary and sole emergency contact for Jasmine Williams until further notice, and that Chantel Williams was not to remove the child from the premises without Reggie's explicit written consent. Mrs. Gable, remembering her conversation with Chantel just days before, felt a chill. She immediately updated the school's records and sent a certified email to both parents confirming the change as per the court's directive. Chantel received that email as she was sitting in her car, frantically trying to understand why none of her cards were working. She saw the subject line from the preschool and felt a fresh wave of horror. He was taking her daughter. He was using her own tactics against her, but with the force of the law behind him. The social consequences were just as swift. Her friend Alicia, the one with the BMW 3 Series, received a call from her husband, the corporate lawyer. He had heard a rumor through the legal grapevine about Mark Renshaw. "Stay away from Chantel Williams," he had warned. "She's radioactive." When Chantel called Alicia, sobbing and desperate, Alicia's voice was distant and cold. "I'm sorry, Chantel. I can't get involved." The friends she had cultivated as status symbols, the women whose lives she had so desperately coveted, abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. Her social currency, built on a foundation of lies and aspirations, had been rendered worthless. By 5 p.m. on Friday, Chantel Williams was financially paralyzed, legally exposed, and socially isolated. She was a ghost in the life she had tried to steal. The West End townhome, the new car, the life of curated perfection, it had all vanished. She was left with nothing but a series of frantic, unanswered voicemails to a man who would not pick up, and the terrifying, dawning realization that the quiet, simple man she had so casually dismissed had just systematically and completely dismantled her entire existence. 6 months later, the dust had settled, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably altered. The chill of December had replaced the oppressive heat of June. The legal battle had been swift and brutal. The voice memo was the centerpiece of the proceedings, an undeniable testament to Chantel's character and intent. It was played in court, and the silence that followed was heavy and damning. Reggie kept the house. Brenda had successfully argued that Chantel's fraudulent actions and siphoning of marital funds voided her claim to half the equity. The judge agreed, ordering that Chantel's share of the home's value be satisfied by the $48,000 in her secret account, which was then turned over to Reggie to pay off legal fees and reestablish his financial footing. Chantel was left with nothing from the sale that never happened. The bungalow in Church Hill, once a symbol of what she considered a stagnant life, now belonged solely to Reggie and Jasmine. He also received primary physical custody of his daughter. The judge had been appalled by Chantel's calculated effort to erase Reggie from Jasmine's life. The final custody order was clear. Reggie was the custodial parent. Chantel was granted visitation every other weekend. Her plan to establish herself as the sole caregiver had backfired spectacularly, resulting in the very outcome she had tried to inflict upon him. Chantel's life had unraveled completely. Her lawyer, Mark Renshaw, had been suspended from the Virginia State Bar for 2 years. His reputation was destroyed. Without access to funds and with her social circle evaporated, Chantel had been forced to take a job as a receptionist at a dental office. A bitter irony, given her father's profession, earning $42,000 a year. She lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment complex off Midlothian Turnpike, a cramped 600-square-foot space that cost her $1,400 a month in rent. The life she had so carefully plotted, the $650,000 West End townhome, had been replaced by a beige box with a view of a parking lot. Reggie's life, in contrast, had bloomed in the space cleared by the storm. The house felt lighter without the constant weight of Chantel's disapproval. His $66,000 salary was more than enough to support himself and Jasmine comfortably. There was no more pressure to buy things they couldn't afford, no more silent judgment over a $15 bottle of wine. There was peace. Their new life was built around simple, quiet routines. And the most important of these routines took place every Saturday morning. At 10 a.m., Reggie and Jasmine would walk the 4 blocks from their house to the Church Hill branch of the Richmond Public Library. It was a small, beautiful old building, a place that smelled of old paper and quiet dreams. On this particular Saturday, Jasmine was sitting at a low table in the children's section, a collection of crayons spread out before her. She was focused intently on her drawing. Reggie sat in a nearby chair, reading a book on network security, but mostly he just watched his daughter. He watched the way her coils of hair, adorned with colorful beads that clicked softly when she moved, bounced around her face. He watched the fierce concentration in her deep brown eyes, luminous in the soft library light. After a few minutes, she held up her masterpiece. "I'm finished, Daddy." He leaned over to look. On the page were 2 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. They were drawn with the charming imprecision of a 4-year-old, but the details were clear. One figure was taller, one was smaller. She had used a dark brown crayon, the one labeled chestnut, for their skin. "That's you and me, Daddy," she explained, pointing a small finger at the drawing. Her voice was full of pride. "We're a family." Reggie felt a familiar tightness in his throat, but this time it wasn't from grief or rage. It was from an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. He took the drawing from her, his hands gentle. "It's the most beautiful drawing I have ever seen," he said, his voice husky. "I'm going to put it on the refrigerator right next to the last one." He looked at the simple drawing, at the 2 brown figures holding hands. In that moment, he understood something profound. Chantel had spent years chasing a life defined by dollar amounts. The $43,000 car, the $2,400 dress, the $650,000 townhome. She had believed that wealth was something you could acquire, something you could see and touch. She had tried to strip him of everything she thought had value, but true wealth, he now knew, wasn't in a bank account. It wasn't in a deed or a title. True wealth was the quiet peace of a Saturday morning. It was the weight of a small hand in his. It was the sound of clicking beads and the waxy smell of crayons. It was the unconditional love of a child, captured in a simple drawing made with a brown crayon. It was a richness Chantel, in her desperate, frantic pursuit of more, would never, ever understand. He was not a rich man, not by the world's standards, but holding that drawing in the quiet sanctuary of the public library with his daughter by his side, Reggie Williams knew he was the wealthiest man alive. Sometimes the greatest betrayals don't just teach us who to avoid, they teach us what truly matters. What do you think is the most valuable thing in life that can't be bought? Share your thoughts with our community in the comments. We read every single one.